The Honourable Nathan Guy.
Yeah, thanks, Mr Speaker. There's been a lot of talk in the last week or so about the Labor-Greens MOU. I call it the marriage of unity, but wait, it might end up being called the marriage of disunity. Mr Speaker, let me take you through a little example that we've seen play out in the last week or so since this marriage of disunity is playing out. On the west coast of the South Island, we have Damien O'Connor. Very strong challenge from our National List MP, Maureen Pugh. Of course, the local paper, what do? They are interested in local stories. They pick up the phone, they ring Damien O'Connor, he answers in there, and they ask Damien O'Connor, do you support this MOU? They had to ask him 7 times whether he supported it or not, Mr Speaker. And in fact, I think everyone on the West Coast is actually unsure whether the local MP does support this MOU or not, because the West Coast are very pragmatic people. That's right. The coasters know a hell of a lot about primary production. Actually, so does Damien O'Connor. And he knows that this deal is terrible for his voters on the coast. He knows that what underpins his regional economy is dairy farming. Well, we've just heard a speech, actually 2 of them, opposing dairy farmers from the Greens. They would prefer we had no dairy farmers in the whole of New Zealand, let alone on the west coast of the South Island. We also saw in 2014 the Greens opposed, when we had special legislation, cyclone, I think it was Ita had come through, and there was a whole lot of wind-blown trees down there on the west coast. Damien O'Connor crossed the floor because he knew that was good for local jobs on the west coast. So the Greens opposed to that. And of course, what we will also see play out is the Greens are opposed to mining. Hugely important on the west coast. But importantly, let's not worry too much about the marriage of disunity, because it's already playing out. It's playing out in the west coast. It's playing out as I speak. I think actually most Labor voters that are on the right of their caucus, like Mr O'Connor, like Stuart Nash, like Kelvin Davis, like many others, Phil Goff, Phil Twyford, Clayton Cosgrove, they're all petrified of this deal. So you can bet your bottom dollar, those that are standing, those names I've just mentioned, when their billboards go up and their electorates, they'll have a little tinge of red, but they'll all be about the personality, because they know that this deal is terrible for Labor. And I think ultimately it will be terrible for Greens. I reckon they will both be punished. But importantly, I want to focus on this budget, because this budget is what matters. This budget, what people are talking about in the west coast of the South Island, this budget are what people are talking about in my electorate of Otaki. This is Bill English's 8th budget, a fantastic budget, back into surplus, massive investment into health and education, $2.2 billion in health over 4 years, more money into the gold card. Of course, in my electorate, Otaki, I've got the highest number of over 65s on a proportionality basis. They'll stop me on the street saying, well done for supporting the gold card. They really back this budget. More money into health, more money into education. They're very concerned about their grandkids, and they acknowledge that this is an all-time spend in health and education and social services, and that's hugely important. They acknowledge that there's 200,000 jobs being created in the last 3 years. Isn't that fantastic? 170,000 jobs predicted to be created in the next 3 years. This is a government that's doing things, that's getting the books back in order, paying down debt, getting back in the black. And actually voters acknowledge that. They acknowledge that we have steered this country through the tough times. What's really exciting about this budget for me, Mr Speaker, record biosecurity investment, $223 million, 90 new staff working on the front line, 24 of these amazing dog detector teams, that's an extra 24, 6 new X-ray machines on top of the other ones that we've got. We've now got government industry agreements, 9 parties have signed up to that. A huge investment happening in keeping our borders safe on top of the border clearance levy and the like. And I could go on. $70 million into managing TB. This is a very invasive disease that we've got to get on top of, and that means 70 million on top of 30 million over the next 4 years. That's a $100 million investment, which has been applauded by many in the primary sector. We want to eradicate TB from wildlife by 2026, and we are on track to do that with this investment. Also, wilding pines. Many people will be unaware of that these are causing a huge amount of concern in regional and provincial New Zealand. So we have estimated about 1.8 million hectares of these invasive wild pines. They're basically a weed tree. And they're spreading their seeds at about 90,000 hectares a year. Kevin Haig knows all about this. He's nodding. So he sees this as a very prudent investment. We want to get in there and stop the spread of these diseases, these wilding pine trees, and kill them off. And we hope that regional councils will come on board and partner with us. We hope that philanthropic organisations will come and partner with us, and communities as well. Also, $100 million in environmental clean-up projects. That's a massive investment. And it's interesting that the Greens, when they had their conference over the weekend and the co-leader stood up and said, "I am the river and the river is me," well, now they're out there saying we need to do more in this space. And in actual fact, I think that this government's done a huge amount in cleaning up our waterways. Actually, way more than when the Greens got left at the altar and Labor came into charge in the last 3 years of the Labor New Zealand coalition. Because importantly, over that period of time, from 2000 to 2008, there was about $29 million invested in clean-up of our rivers and streams and lakes. This government has invested $115 million since 2008 to 2015, and we're now going to invest another $100 million. I think this is fantastic that we can get out there and partner, once again, with other community organisations, the regional councils, philanthropic individuals want to come forward and partner with us. And the Greens now have just woken up to the fact that actually rivers are important. Well, we've known that for a huge amount of time. We are investing $5 million in cleaning up the Manawatu River, which runs through my electorate. We are investing over $1 million in Lake Horowhenua, cleaning up that. We're doing a huge amount as we speak. We're also investing $20 million in the Global Research Alliance, Mr. Speaker. That's very important for our farmers, because we know that we've got, in our terms of our emissions profile, about half comes from agriculture. So we've got the best scientists in New Zealand and some around the world that are working on this initiative. GRA's got about 46 countries that have signed up for it. We are leading the world in trying to reduce methane emissions in our animals. I think that's a fantastic initiative that the government's very keen, once again, to focus on and ensure that we give our farmers solutions. The Greens and Labor just want to give our farmers problems. We want to invest in new technology. We want to provide the tools in the toolbox so that farmers can open up and say, yes, this is how I can address my emissions profile. What's really also important to acknowledge in this budget, Mr. Speaker, is more money into tertiary education. Now, we know we need to attract another 50,000 people in the primary sector in the next 9 years, and that's going to be really challenging. Over half of those, so 26,000, will need to have a level 4 or a tertiary qualification. They'll be food safety scientists, they'll be robotic engineers, they'll be environmental planners. That's why this budget focuses so heavily on science, $761 million. Ultimately, that means that our investment in science will be about $1.6 billion in the next few years. We're also going to put more money into science, engineering, and agriculture and veterinary science students as well, in terms of their tuition fees. So this is a budget that's focused on the future. This is a budget that's about getting us back into surplus. This is a budget that's about creating jobs for all of New Zealanders. 200,000 in the last 3 years, another 170,000 in the next 3 years. This is a government that's really focused on the issues that matter for New Zealand. I applaud Bill English in his 8th budget. He has done incredibly well to get us back into surplus, to grow this economy. We are now favoured on the international stage. When you look at all these other countries, whether it's OECD or different measurements, when you think about little old New Zealand, we can put our hand on our heart and say we've done a fantastic job getting us through the global financial crisis, doing more in terms of investing in the future and our children and looking after some of those in need. Thank you, Mr Speaker. I applaud this budget.
Mr Speaker.